Hello, and welcome to Peace and Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Gorley, and this is the book where you get to listen to a wonderful young adult's novel, and then you get to listen to a little commentary about that. So we are all the way in chapter 17 of this little young adult novel. You can almost call it a novella. It's pretty short. We actually only have 3 more chapters and epilogue to go, so probably only about 4 episodes of that. We'll probably do a few more episodes with some summary stuff, some Q&A, and maybe special guests and stuff like that. But we're getting towards the end of it. Hopefully you've been enjoying so far. So now in chapter 17, we are kind of like dead set into the crazy part of the plot here. So chapter 16, we just saw that Jen fell on the stage in front of everyone, which is kind of bad. Like, that's pretty, you would not want to do that if you're in the school play, to like fall right on the stage. But like, not tragic necessarily, unless, of course, your mom, like Jen's mom, decides to come up and scream like you are dying in front of everyone and sound super crazy while you do it. So that's kind of where Jen was. And then as Jen, leaves, she overhears her former best friend totally kind of just say, hey, I'm not even friends with that girl anymore, blah, 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 which kind of sucks because, like, Jen kind of like felt, hey, we were drifting apart, but then, wasn't like official, like, hey, we're not friends anymore. It was just like, hey, I know she has like other friends and I'm kind of like in the background, but we're still friends. At least that's kind of how Jen felt. And then, boom, right there in one of her lowest moments, she gets kicked when she's down, and she finds out that her friend is not, kind of just doesn't want to be friends with her anymore. Just completely disowns her, so to speak, which is awful. But so Jen is in a pretty tough spot right now, and she was just walking down the hallway. All right, so she walked down the hallway. Usually during school plays, you have like, a section of the building that's open and then the rest of the building is kind of like closed down. So she's now in like the closed down section, like, where lights aren't even on kind of thing, just walking away from it as far as she could possibly go. So, and it says that as she walked, she remembered the moment when she knew her life was going to be different. And that's where chapter 17 comes in. Chapter 17. She was 11 and 3 months to be exact. The age when childhood is in full bloom, when one understands on a juvenile level who they are and what they best appreciate about childhood life. A time when life's carefree indulgences have peaked, old enough to be able to participate in the pleasures of kid life without the responsibilities of adult life or the pretensions of adolescence. You were tall enough to ride on roller coasters, not be the smallest kid in the playground, and were able to simply enjoy life. Sleepover parties, Lego wars, blanket forts, tea parties, choose your own adventure books, movies, and video games. It was at this glorious summer of youth that Jen came to a life-altering realization. It was a simple field trip that finally gave it away. The 5th grade, end of the year, field trip to Cedar Point Amusement Park. Jen was so excited to go. It was an overnight trip, and each student attending had to pay $105. It was a lot of money for Lena, but luckily both Jen and Aunt Julie donated some money to go to the trip. Jen had paid $45 to go on the trip from her own savings. She needed only to bring the remaining $60, the $40 from Aunt Julie, and another $20 from Lena. Jen thrice explained this to her mom, but Lena did still not understand how much more she had to give or why. Jen explained again and again, but she still didn't get it. Jen showed her mathematically on paper again and again. Lena still didn't get it. Lena even told Jen she was wrong a couple times. It went on minute after minute of Jen explaining and Lena still not understanding the very basic addition. Jen just stared at Lena in disbelief. Is she kidding? Jen knew she was not. How was it possible that her mom didn't know this? This was not the only time that Jen had ever had to correct her mom in basic math. She then thought of every time her mom did something stupid or illogical, every time she forgot something, every time she messed up a recipe, every time she did something weird or embarrassing, and every time she heard her mom had overdrawn their bank account. Jen sat there in silence. Lena was talking to her, but Jen only heard background noise. How had she missed this? Why hadn't she figured out this earlier? It was obvious all along. Jen's thoughts swirled 90 miles an hour in her head. I am smarter than my mom. I am smarter than my mom. My mom is not as smart as me, for real. I am the one in my house that is the smartest. She's not even smart enough to be a mom. I'm going to have to make the decisions for my house. My mom is not smart enough. I am smarter than my mom. I probably have been for years. I thought you had to be like in college or something before you're smarter than your parents. I am 11. This explains why I argue with her so much. I am smarter. Am I going to be able to make all decisions for our house? Am I smart enough? What if I'm not smart enough? I have no one to turn to. What if someone tricks me or I mess up? Who will I go to? What will I do if I mess everything up and no one is there to help me? I don't know if I'm ready for this. No wonder our family is always poor. We probably lose money because of my mom. I don't think I'm ready. I don't think I'm ready. I'm smarter than my mom. How could I end up with such a dumb parent? Why am I so lucky? Why me? I am smarter than my mom. And so her thoughts went. Jen barely slept last night. She thought about all the decisions she might have to make. She thought about how she could have to help her mom be an adult even when she was nowhere near being an adult herself. She thought about how she would have to grow up fast. She thought about how her life would be much different than her friends' lives. It was so much to bear that Jen's behavior started changing. She began to be defiant to her mom for the first time. She would yell at her mom, and one evening she even called her mom stupid when Leda told Jen she was grounded. To this day, she still felt bad about that. For weeks, Jen had problems sleeping. Lena eventually started to notice, but Jen refused to tell her anything. About a month later, Aunt Julie came to visit and took Jen aside to ask what was wrong, and that is when Jen broke. I am smarter than my mom. I am, Aunt Julie. There's something wrong with her. I'm not even 12, and I'm smarter than her. I have been for a long time. She doesn't remember things. She doesn't even know how to do things. She can't do math. I'm smarter than her. Jen, I'm so sorry. I should have told you a long time ago. And they cried together. Aunt Julie, what's wrong with her? Is she like mentally disabled or something? No, your mom was diagnosed with a learning disability. That can mean a lot of things, but to your mom, it means that she has trouble with short-term memory, math, and has difficulty interacting with people in social settings. She doesn't understand social cues and tends to speak and act without thinking. Obviously, her reading is good, which probably kept her from being diagnosed for a long time. When the reading became more difficult and she had to remember more and more information, she began to get poor grades. She almost didn't graduate from high school. She never had many friends and never had very good grades, but in high school, both of those things got worse. It wasn't until she was halfway through high school that she got diagnosed for a learning disability. Not that Hemlock Ridge is the worst school system in the world, but your mom sort of fell through the cracks. It wasn't until a good math teacher suggested that there was a problem and actually went out of her way to get your mom tested that they did something about it. That at least got your mom through high school. Jen and Aunt Julie talked for hours as Aunt Julie explained that she didn't want to burden Jen with everything, but that she probably should have said something earlier. She also explained that while academically she might be more intelligent than her mom still deserved respect. Lena had life experience that Jen did not have, and she was a good mother despite her shortcomings. Jen admitted that overall she was still a good mom. It was after this that things started to get better. Jen had someone to talk to, and Aunt Julie had become calling Jen from Michigan every 2 weeks or so, ever since, just to check up. But none of that mattered now. Things being slightly better didn't change anything. Jen had been humiliated in front of the whole school, so much so that even her former best friend had to lie to keep from being associated with her. Jen kept walking. She strode past the no entry sign placed in front of the dark hallway illuminated by only a few exit lights. It looked creepy, barely lit. Jen half hoped that she'd be attacked and put out of her misery. She walked past the last few sets of lockers toward the outer door, next to the glass-enclosed corner office, and exited where there was not a soul in sight. It had started raining again. The rain was cold, but it didn't matter. Jen was happy for it. She wanted to feel the cold. She wanted to feel the pain of cold. She pushed through the rain and stopped at a yellow beech tree past the far corner of auxiliary parking. She leaned up against the tree and screamed, "Why? Why does this all have to happen? Why me?" Jen began crying so hard that she couldn't speak. Add in the shiver from the rain, and she had nothing more she could say. Her heels began to sink in the soft ground as she continued leaning against the golden beech tree that was steadily dropping its leaves through the rain. She looked down for the first time and noticed the side of her hand. There was a chunk of skin gone. Blood was dripping as steadily as the rain. She must have left a trail all the way down the hallway. She watched it for a minute and could now feel a throbbing. Rain washed the blood to the ground, mixing it into tiny swirling pools on the roots of the tree. She looked up at the orange and yellow leaves floating down through the rain and branches and whispered the word, "Why?" She sat for a moment, absolute silence and blankness. Then she felt something. She felt the last thing that she was expecting. She felt peace. Peace she couldn't explain. Peace that took her into a different moment. It was the same moment, but somehow it was now a better moment. Then she felt the voice. She didn't hear it. It wasn't audible. But it was as if someone was speaking inside her mind. It said, "I know the plans I have for you. Plans to bless you, Jen, not to hurt you. Plans to give you a hope and a future." New tears began to fall. Different tears. Not of anger, not of pain, but tears of relief. Tears that came from feeling love. Love like Jen had never felt before. The feeling was so strong that it somehow felt physical, and she even felt it surging through her veins. She didn't know exactly why, but Jen knew that everything was going to be all right. She knew she had heard those words before from Reverend Adam, but yet she knew that this time they had nothing to do with him. He was the last person on her mind right now. She knew that those words were for her. God was speaking to her this time. Jen sat in euphoric peace for a few seconds as her clothes became more and more wet, yet her soul and even her body felt warm and rejuvenated. The feeling slowly faded until Jen felt nothing but the cold rain. She noticed the last couple patches of her clothes absorbing the rain, the last couple dry patches of her clothes absorbing the rain. She looked up at the wet autumn through the red, yellow, and orange trees. It was beautiful, but also so cold. So cold that Jen got up. As she rose to her feet, Jen said the most meaningful prayer she had ever said. "Thank you." Jen started walking back toward the school. She felt nothing, but instead of the empty, depressing nothing that was normal to Jen, she felt a calm, constant nothing. Her hair was now soaked, and the drops seemed to drip straight down the back of her neck, causing her to shiver every few steps. As Jen headed back toward the school, she noticed that she was all the way on the edge of what would be considered Hemlock Ridge's high school campus. Jen followed the sidewalk to the main building. As she approached the adjacent faculty parking lot, Jen was happy that sidewalks were full of puddles but empty of people. She noticed her shoes, which now only had patches of shiny black. The rest of the shoes were now camouflaged with mud, grass, and tiny leaves. These stupid shoes, what was I thinking? She shook her head and kept walking. It occurred to Jen that they must have kept going with the show, and there would soon be an intermission. Jen wishfully considered that people might forget what had happened as the play continued. A young woman was walking ahead. Jen tried not to make eye contact with her, but before she got a chance to turn her head to avoid her, she heard, Jen! Jen, are you okay? It was Lindsay Jenkins. Jen looked up and gave a half smile through the soaked hair hanging around her. Jen, I'm so sorry, Lindsay said while wrapping her arms around Jen. Jen was not expecting to be hugged, but it was comforting and much warmer than she had felt a moment ago. Are you okay? Before Jen got a chance to answer, Lindsay began again. Jen, you have to be freezing. And again, before Jen had her chance to respond, she found herself wearing Lindsay Jenkins' very fashionable navy trench-style rain jacket. It was warm and had a clean, fresh-smelling perfume smell to it. Jen felt a little awkward wearing the jacket, but it was so warm that she just went with it. Jen, your mom has been looking for you. She's obviously worried. I saw what happened. I'm so sorry, Jen. Are you okay? Yeah, I'm okay, I guess. Part of Jen wanted to tell Lindsay about her moment outside, but she didn't know how to tell her, so she didn't say anything. So your mom has been a little bit worked up ever since then. Do you want me to bring her out to you so she's not so worked up in front of anyone else? Yes, thank you, Jen said, relieved that Lindsay had thought of that. Jen stood under the overhang of the nearest entrance to the school. Her soaked hair hung straight down, clinging to her ears. Jen saw someone walking through the clear glass enclosure and turned and stepped over to the very edge of the overhang to avoid being seen by anyone walking by. Jen felt like she should be angry, but for some reason she was not. She felt sort of a numb peace. She wasn't sure why, but it was as if her mom, Morgan, and all the embarrassment, self-loathing, and anger she had felt didn't matter. Almost like it was a dream, but yet she still wasn't awake yet. She knew her feelings and sense of peace had something to do with the moment she had with God, but she didn't know what or how. She just calmly stood, waiting for Lindsay and her mom to return. Jen could see her mom coming through the glass enclosure. Elena was walking so fast that she looked as if she was trotting or awkwardly jogging. Although Lindsay was much taller, she looked as if she was straining to keep up with Lena. She burst through the outside door. Jenny! Jenny! I thought you were really hurt, Jenny. Don't do that to me. I thought you were really hurt. Now, what Jen wanted to say and what she actually said ended up being two different things. She wanted to say something along the lines of, what I did to you? What I did to you? Are you kidding me? You absolutely humiliated me in front of the school. People make fun of me forever because of this. You make my life miserable. But instead, she went easy on her mom. Mom, I'm fine. You embarrassed me in front of the whole school. I was fine, and you yelled across the whole auditorium. I'm not a little baby anymore. Jenny, I'm so sorry. I was worried. I thought you were hurt. I didn't think about how embarrassing it would be for you. I was worried you were hurt. I was not hurt. It's fine. We have to go. It's almost intermission. Don't you have to go back up there? No, I'm done with my lines, and no, I'm not going back out there. Let's go. And that was chapter 17. All right, so that was obviously a pretty intense chapter. But it's kind of like the pinnacle of the book there. Man, I think, it's kind of intense and everything. One of the things, when I was writing this book, I felt a long time ago that this was just absolutely something that, this was one of the first chapters kind of almost I wrote I've revised it 100 times since then, but like I knew that at some point Jen would have this kind of like turning point in her life, and it would be because of God just like coming into her life in a new way. She had this kind of casual relationship with God and everything, but like God really like speaking to her like on a personal level. And this is like, to me, like just the most important chapter of the book, that here you have this girl Jen, and just at her weakest and lowest moment like of her life so far, like God met her there. And I feel like that is just the absolute character of Jesus, that he meets us in our like lowest points of our lives, like when we have nothing else. I remember, I know I'm thinking about this story right now, but I remember one time meeting this Sudanese refugee in college, right? And it's kind of ironic because I work with immigrants and refugees like nonstop for the last like 15 years, which I absolutely enjoy with all my heart. But I remember meeting this guy from Sudan, and I just remember I was talking to him, and he was talking about how tough it was living in a refugee camp, and that he went from, like, I've met many students like this after, but he was from a war-torn part of Africa, this guy, and he literally like stuff blew up kind of thing in his town, his village, and his mom was really sick, and he couldn't even go with his mom. His mom couldn't even come with her because she was like so sick. But his mom's like, no, you need to go with like your uncle, like exit like our town. And later he found out his mom was like okay and everything, but at the time he had to leave, and he was like probably like in middle school or something. And he said he got to this refugee camp, and it was like, okay, cool, I'm at this refugee camp now, like I'm like safe. And even getting there was like crazy. He said like all these wild animals, rivers of crocodiles he had to cross, all this crazy stuff to get there. He finally gets there, and they're kind of like, they're in Ethiopia, which is not, maybe the greatest country, or like well, let's say they have their own problems in Ethiopia. So here's a refugee camp in this, kind of impoverished land of Ethiopia, but at least they were like safe from war for the time being. And this guy just was like absolutely no food. Like he said that his food he got as a refugee was, he got one like little Dixie cup, like the tiny little cups, like the 4-ounce cups of olive oil for the week. And then he got a lima bean for every day of the week. So he got 7 lima beans and 1 Dixie cup of olive oil for the whole week of food. And yeah, just, I mean, like absolutely like almost starving to death. Like he said, like tons of people were like eating random leaves off trees in the refugee camp, and like half of them were getting sick because they weren't like even edible trees, but just people were so hungry. They were looking for any kind of food. And he always said that he was a Christian and everything, and that he had this relationship with God. And I remember just kind of thinking, like, I was like, man, I straight tell him, I was like, man, that must have been so hard to like believe in God, that God still like loved you or whatever when you were going through this. And I remember saying that to him. He looked at me, and he just said, completely against my expectation, he said, no, it wasn't. It's like, that was a very easy time to believe in God, because God was all I had. Like God was the only thing that brought me through that time, and that him being able to like pray and like seek God and to like help him through that situation. I just remember always thinking that, because it's really shocking. Like, wow, like God met him, at least, like mentally, emotionally, spiritually, like, and eventually, physically as well, because he was able to get out of that. And they ended up, after a few months, they actually got like real food and stuff for him fit. But, it's just like, wow, like God was able to meet him where he was. And to me, that's just the absolute like character of like who God is. And to me, and like I can really honestly look at my life, and like every good thing about me and my life like stems from my faith in like Jesus. I can start from like a young age. My parents, the fact that my parents both like love God and like decide to raise me in a way to where like to like demonstrate like love and like caring for other people and caring for like the poor and like treating everyone equally and caring about every single person no matter what they look like or who they are or what they act like or what they believe. Then going on to my life, meeting my wife and settling for like a woman, not settling for like any random girl, but like a woman of absolutely noble character that is this beautiful woman of character that believes all those same things, and like seeks to like treat everyone, in a good way and encourage them and to really look the best of people and, just who I am as like a teacher and a parent and a father. And I'm so not perfect. If you know me at all, if you really know me, I'm totally not perfect at all in any way. I have my own many flaws. But like, I feel like every way that every good part of my character is like Jesus reflected through me. Like I'm almost like I strive to be like a mirror of his love, right? The same way that he loves everyone, no matter, what their religious beliefs are, who they are, what they act like, that, he loved every single person in the same way. I just strive to love other people and like just try to share the hope and the good news that I have in Christ to other people. And it's I feel like I'm gonna get like emotional here. Sorry, talking about it, but it's just one of the most like important things in my life. And this book, in some ways, was just a really, really good way that I could feel like I could express that to me. And then, of course, the title of the book is Of Peace and Precipitation. And, so here this girl is out in this just falling precipitation and this falling rain, this beautiful autumn. And it was in that very moment where like she just felt like the peace of God like overwhelmed her heart and encouraged her soul to like, kind of keep going. And for me, like that's kind of one thing that I always love, like haikus, right? So I kind of talked about this thing at like one of the first episodes, but I love haikus, and I love because it's like a moment in time with nature, and that's one of the times where I feel like I can see God the most clear. So I'm like out in the middle of nature, and I'm away from like the hustle and bustle and the crazy of my life, and I'm like hiking on this like beautiful trail, and like this trees and leaves, and Cleveland at one point was called the Forest City, and if you get away from the actual city limits a little bit, you see these beautiful like deciduous like forests like everywhere, and and you have so many beautiful like trails and metro parks to where sometimes when I'm in those moments or even away from anywhere, like, and I'm able to see just the beauty of nature, like to me, like God is just like so clear. It's like, man, my life and my life's troubles is so insignificant compared to like the actual like expansive form of the universe and nature. And that to me, it's just one of those times where like I see God like so clearly. And so like to me that always had to be like a part of like this chapter where she like met God, and that it was through this like beautiful moment in time with nature that like kind of like spoke really deep into her soul, even though she was at a very low point in her life and everything. But yeah, so that was chapter 17. And a couple other little kind of side notes are kind of like maybe a little more in the lighthearted part is that she talked about age 11, which was one of my very favorite ages, by the way, of my life. I had my fifth grade teacher was awesome. I had like a lot of friends. I had a best friend named Aaron as well. Shout out to Aaron McGowan, wherever you are right now. I think you're like Minnesota or something, or I don't know. I don't even know where he is, but he was a really super cool guy, and we were like really good friends. We like had these big Lego wars, and that's something I mentioned, that Lego wars, and also Choose Your Own Adventure books, which got me to actually read books because they were awesome. If you've never read a Choose Your Own Adventure book in your life, you are missing out. All these lame books that have the endings written for you, but Choose Your Own Adventure, you get to like pick, what happens through decisions, and they're awesome. Awesome. And I also may or may not be a collector of said Choose Your Own Adventure books. I may or may not have like 60 of them in my house. my special bookshelf in my office. But anyways, so that's a different question. You can ask me about that later. But I love Choose Your Own Adventure books. They're amazing. And yeah, also a little shout out to Cedar Point there as well. But yeah, there's just some fun times. So like, to me, that is sort of like the summer bloom of like your childhood, before, you're old enough to be not the smallest kid anymore, but then not have the pretensions of adolescence in there, where you have to be cool or you have to whatever, you have to try to impress girls or something. I don't know, whatever you have to do. But it's not like adolescence. You can just kind of like enjoy your life as a child. At least in a perfect world you can, anyways. And yeah, so that was some of the things that I kind of wrote. That so she was about that age when she kind of like figured out that she was smarter. You can notice like at that point in her life, I was trying to write it like she was like 11, that maybe you wouldn't have the same vocab or just keep repeating that I'm smarter than my mom. And maybe in hindsight I would have wrote that a little bit differently, but I definitely wrote it from the perspective of like 11-year-old freaking out and not really know what to say or how to express that. Not really understanding the full range of what she felt or to really express that very eloquently. But so that is it. So we'll have to see from this moment if things get better or worse or the kind of roller coaster for Jen, or we'll see. We'll have to see with the last few chapters. Well, thank you very much for listening. I hope you're enjoying it. I hope you enjoyed this chapter. This was a very, very important and meaningful chapter to the book and the story. And I hope that you're able to find the same meaning that both myself and this made-up character, Jen, have found in a relationship with God. So, all right. But thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time. Much love. Goodbye.